Hi, accounting students. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at the Synoptic and 5 journal systems. Just to do a quick review of what we did in the theory lesson, we're going to talk about very briefly the two different systems and how they're the same and how they're different. With the Synoptic Journal, we have all the commonly used or most commonly used accounts listed across the top on one document. So you'll see here that we have our space for bank, debit and credit, accounts receivable and payable, debit and credit, sales, purchases. Then we have both HST accounts. And then over here on the right, we have space for other accounts that may come up from time to time. We would then total up each of these columns and move those columns or post them to the general ledger. So here in the general ledger, rather than having, so for instance, in our bank account, having 200 or 1,000 transactions to the bank account, there would only be two entries, one for the total of the debits and one for the total of the credits. But we'll get back to that in the lesson. So you'll notice here at the bottom I have them color-coded. So the other system that we use is called the 5 journal system. So we have cash receipts and payments, sales, purchases, and general journal. These are the 5 most commonly used journals, and within them you will see that the accounts that are related just to that kind of transaction are included. So for instance, in our cash receipts, so in this case we're receiving money. In these transactions, we have our bank account, but only the debit. Same for accounts receivable, it would be a credit only because if we're receiving money, it implies that somebody is paying down their debt to us. So those would always be listed as credits. The other reason that we might be receiving money is sales. We would never be receiving money in a purchase transaction, for instance. And then again, the HST payable account is the only one related to receiving journal for receiving taxes for when we receive money on sales. So you would never be receiving money and have an HST recoverable line item in it. And then again here we have our other account area where we might list other accounts that we might need from time to time. So then we have our cash payments journal, which is set up the same, but with its relevant accounts, sales journal, and purchases. And then for anything that doesn't fit, where you have one of the accounts that we can't fit in there, or both the accounts, I guess, we would use the general journal. So for instance, if you had a situation maybe where the owner was withdrawing say supplies from the business, that kind of an entry would go here because there's no cash involved. Now, one thing that you may notice is that we have sort of two areas where money is coming in, so cash receipts and sales, and two where cash is going out or potentially going out, cash payments and purchases. So this is really important, and we'll do some examples with this in a few minutes, so don't worry. But the purchases and sales and journals, we only use them when there is absolutely no money involved. So it's all on account, either accounts payable or accounts receivable. Anytime we have any money involved, we're going to either use cash receipts or payments, even if there's an account payable or receivable involved. And that's why here in the cash payments journal, for example, we have the added account of accounts payable. So we can take some money, pay some money out from the bank account, and we can have some on account that we are going to owe people. Okay, so let us get started with these transactions. What we're going to do is we're going to do the same 5 transactions in both of these journals. I'm going to walk you through the whole process with the Synoptic Journal, and then I'm going to let you loose and do the 5 journal system on your own. I'll give you a couple of hints, but you'll see. So you're going to need the Bombay Trading Company, the guided practice spreadsheet from your Canvas site, and you're going to need your textbook on page 487 is where the first transaction begins. So in this transaction, we have, it occurs on May 1st, so we're going to use our Synoptic Journal. So this one is relatively easy. Everything is going to be going on this one page. So In our on our May 4th transaction, we have cash sales ticket number 57 to record the sale of $256 of merchandise in cash with HST of 33.28 for a total payment to us of 289.28. So thinking about the accounts that we're going to need here, we're going to need our bank account because we have some cash. We've made a sale, so we're going to use our sale account. And we have HST payable that we have to worry about, so we're going to need our payable account. So just like we normally would with a regular journal, we're going to put in our month first, and then our date of the transaction, which is the 4th. We made a cash sale, so we're going to use our particulars column a lot in this journal. Because we have so much stuff going in one place, it's important to differentiate what all the things are. Now, it does say that we have, it relates to our sales ticket number 57. So we're going to list that. And then since we received the 289.28, that is going to be a debit to our bank account. So I'm going to list that into the debit column of our bank. And so you'll notice a couple things here. One is over on the right that it is now showing out of balance on our zero proof entry there. And then also it's keeping a running total of our account for us. So then the next entry I'm going to want to put in then is in my sales account is my credit for $256. And then the last one is going to be my HST payable for $33.28. There you go. So now we should have a zero proof there. We do. And we're good to go. And the difference overall is 0 as well. So we can now move on to our next transaction. Normally, at this point, you would want to move to our general ledger and do that entry. As I mentioned before, the nice thing about this, not only does it reduce the amount of work in your general journal, but it also reduces a lot of the work in the ledger as well, because all we're going to do is post the totals at the end instead of every individual item. Okay, so the next transaction we have is for May the 5th. We have a sales invoice number 165 that we issued to Paul Rogan for the sale of $412 worth of merchandise on account, so there's no cash involved. And there's HST of $53.56 for a total owing of $465.56. All right, so just like in the general journal, we don't repeat the month, but we do need our date. And the person, or the name rather, of our client is P. Rogan. This relates back to sales ticket number 165, so we're going to, or sales invoice rather. So we want number 165 in there. Now in this case, we didn't receive any cash, but the total amount of what is owed to us is $465.56. So we're going to put that in there. And then we also want to recognize the sale of $412. And then, of course, we have our HST payable of $53.56. There we go. So just making sure that we are balanced. We are, and we're balanced overall. And so we are good to go on to the next transaction now. So our third transaction occurred on May 6th. This is a purchase invoice, so we're going to flip the model a little bit here. We have received an invoice from Empire Wholesale for merchandise on account for $816 with HST of 13%. So we're going to put in our date then of the 6th. We have not been given a reference number to put in, but it's for Empire Wholesale. So we're going to put that in. And in this case, we need our accounts payable account for $922.08. That's going to be a credit because this is an increase in what we owe to other people. We then have some purchases worth $816, and then our HST recoverable in this case is going to be $106.08. Okay. So again, checking that we have our zero balances, we do. So we are good to move on to our next transaction. So in this case, then the fourth entry, this occurred on May 7th. And we have a purchase invoice now and check copy number 74 for the cash purchase of supplies from Deluxe Stationery, $235.40 with HST. So what this is really saying is that we've received this invoice and we're paying it. So that's really what this transaction is about, is that we are paying it. So we're going to need a credit to our bank account. We have more supplies, so that will be a debit, and our HST recoverable has gone up, so it is also a debit. So underneath our particulars, we're going to put in Deluxe Stationers. And it was copy number 74, so we're going to put that in as our reference. This is money coming out of our bank account, so we're going to have a credit for $266 for the total. We then have, excuse me, we then have our HST recoverable of $30.60. Now the problem here is that when we look, we don't have any of the other, or the last account that we need, which is our supplies account. If we look across the top here, it is not listed anywhere. So in that line, so not at the top, but in the same line or the same row as the rest of the transaction, we're going to add in now that new account, or the name of that account that's not listed at the top. And in this case, we have an increase in our supplies by $235.40. So I'm going to list that in there. So now I can see that I am balanced in the line, and my sheet is balanced overall. So now I can go ahead and do my last transaction. So this transaction occurred also on May 7th. Here we have a check copy number 75 for having paid the rent for the month to Ryder Realty. It is for $2,800 for the rent plus HST recoverable of $364. So again, I'm going to put in my date. I'm going to put in the name of the company to whom we paid this, the check number, and this is coming out of the bank, so I want the total amount, which is $31.64. Again, I have HST recoverable, which is $364. And again, the rent expense account is not listed anywhere up at the top here. So same thing again, I'm going to go stay in the line, and I'm going to put in my account name rent expense. And then I'm going to put in my total of that amount of the rent itself, so $2,800. So here I have a debit for $2,100, a $2,800 for the expense, a debit for the HST recoverable of $364, for a total amount paid of $3,164. So that's the end of the examples that we're going to do in terms of the transactions. So now what we're going to do is talk very briefly about how to post these to the general ledger. So what we're going to do is two things. So, and I'm only going to do a few of these with you, and I'm going to leave you to do the rest. So we'll do the first four of these accounts, and then I'm going to show you how to do the supplies entry. Okay. So this is very straightforward. We're going to take this amount here, and paying attention to the fact that it's $289.28 and a debit, we're going to go to our bank account. Now these entries are all occurring on the 31st, so we're going to put a 31 in our totals line. And so now we're going to go to our bank account. So make sure you have our bank account. This is the total at the end of the month, so we're going to put in 31. Now in this case, we're using a Synoptic Journal, so we're going to use the code SJ for Synoptic Journal. And if you look, it is from page 41. So we want to put in this, in the GL, we're going to put in SJ 41 so that we know where that came from. In this case, we have, the first entry we have is for $289.28. $289.28. So I have, I'm going to take this number, and since it's a debit, I'm going to add my new number because it's also a debit. I have debit on top of debit, so my new balance indicator is going to be a debit as well. Now, before we go on to do anything else, we have to do like our little check mark thing. So I'm going to take my account number from here, which is 101. I'm going to go back to the Synoptic Journal, and then underneath where I got that total, I'm going to put in number 101. This is my account number. This is like my posting reference. Same thing I'm going to do now, only this is for the total of the credits, 3430. So I'm going to go to my GL. This is also occurring on the 31st. XJ41, this time is a credit for 3430. In this case, I need to subtract these two numbers. I'm going to go up to my 3546, and go over to my 3430. I have more debit than credit, so my indicator is still a debit. So again, that number 101, I'm going to go back to my Synoptic Journal, and I'm going to type that in there. All right, next thing we have is our debit to accounts receivable for $456.56. So I'm going to find my accounts receivable. There they are, right there. Put in my date. And I have a debit for $465.56. And I have debit on top of debit, so I'm going to put debit there. I'm then going to take my account number 105, go back to my Synoptic Journal, and put in 105. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with these 5 to do here. I'm going to stop now and or jump ahead a little bit and show you how to do these two. There's a couple of differences. Mainly the fact that there is only one entry. There's no totals for each of these. The second thing is that these occurred on the 7th. We're not taking the totals at the end of the month. They actually occurred on the 7th, so we're going to use the 7th for those dates. So next thing I need is my supplies account. So I'm going to go to my general journal. I'm going to skip down to my supplies. So as I said, this occurred on the 7th, and I'm still using my Synoptic Journal 41. I have a increase or a debit of $235.40. So I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to do my math. I have debit on top of debit, so I need to put a debit there. So again, I'm going to take my 125, but in this case, I'm going to put it in the posting reference, kind of like we had before, okay, in our regular journal. Same thing with the rent expense. I have a debit for $2,800, so I'm going to go to my general journal, or my ledger rather. I'm going to find my rent expense, which is here. This occurred on the 7th. Came from Synoptic Journal. Oops. 41, and that was a debit for $2,800. I had no debit before, so I can just equals that over there, and now I have more debit, so that's that. I'm then going to take my account number 530, and you guessed it, put it next to my rent expense over here. Okay, so that's the end of the process for handling the Synoptic Journal. In some ways it's nice because everything's in one place. You can kind of see everything at once, but you have a lot of accounts that you don't always necessarily use. The hard part with the 5-journal system is kind of doing the pre-analysis or the decision tree process to figure out what account you need. So we're going to do the first one together in this, and then I'm going to let you loose to finish that up and then hand it into the Dropbox. So going back to our first transaction then for May 4th, we have a cash sales ticket, number 57, for a sale of $256. So we got to figure out now which of the 5 journals do we need, all right? Well, it involves cash, so I know that I don't need my general journal. What I do need is to decide whether or not am I paying this or bringing this money in. So it's a sales ticket, and so we are receiving this cash. So we need cash receipts or sales. Since we have some of the money coming in, at least somewhere, in this case all of it, we need to use the cash receipts journal. Yes, we are selling, but you can only use the sales journal when it's 100% on accounts receivable. The minute you have any cash, even a penny coming in on a transaction, you have to use the cash receipts journal even for sales. All right, so the setup is the same again. So we're going to use our May 4th in this case, and we have a cash sale. And we have a reference number of 57 for the sales ticket. We are receiving the full amount in cash, which is $289.28. So we're going to put that in to this account. And then along with that, we have a sales entry of 256. So that represents the value of the goods we sold in terms of revenue. And then we have our HST payable, which is 33.28. As you can see right away, the nice thing about this, even though you have more journals to worry about, once you figure out which one to use, it's really a lot easier because you don't have to worry about all the extra counts that you wouldn't normally use. So in this case, for a sale, we don't have HST recoverable. You would never have HST recoverable on a sale. So we don't have that account here. We don't have purchases because you would never be purchasing with money coming in. Same with accounts receivable. Even the credit line of the bank, we don't have a credit entry here, a credit column, because you would never have a credit to bank on a sale transaction. In the same way, if you did have something bizarre and unusual that didn't fit across the top, then you could add it in here. And so you would add it in, and then whether it's the name of it. So if it was like, this is cash receipts, so I don't know if somebody was paying you for maybe a service that you had listed somewhere else, I guess. You could list that account here, and then whether it was a debit or a credit. Here, if you had more than one account that fell under the other category, you can use the number of lines you would need to complete the transaction. So let's say in this case you had two other accounts. So you would list the first one and its amount, the second one and its amount, and then the third transaction you would list beginning over here. Or rather, the second transaction you would list on the next available line. Right? Now, in terms of the posting, it works exactly the same. So your totals are listed here across the bottom. You find the account at the top, the ledger, and then make sure you have a debit. That number, that total gets posted to the general ledger just the way we did before. And then you would come back and type in your account number. Now, in this case, I have all the posting is the same. So I've left it as the answer key, but you need to make sure that you go and get your account number for each of the totals and put it back there, okay, at the bottom. And you only need to do the ones where there's actual values. You don't need to do the zero value accounts. All right, so there you go. Good luck with the rest of that. When you've completed it, please post the link to the Dropbox provided. Good luck.